when I was putting this together, I immediately thought of this amazing quote here, amazing in the context in which it was presented more specifically. So a couple of years ago, my brother got me a wonderful Christmas present. He got me a master class in short story writing with Joyce Carol Oates. And she's one of our great literary writers and novelists, and she's also a teacher. And in this masterclass, she teaches you, in addition to the craft of just writing short stories, she spent a lecture on what are the adversaries to writers. When I think of writers, really, I'm thinking of students as well, people that need to sit down and study and focus. And she talked about, really in our day and age, one of the biggest problems with trying to write is just all the distractions that are around us. Phones going off, the dogs barking, the doorbell rings. This happens all the time. Sometimes we cannot control it, right? Life just happens. But there are things that we can control. And that's what Joyce Carol Oates is talking about here. We have to put ourselves essentially in environments where we kind of protect ourselves from distraction. But how do we do that? And why do we do that? And what's the evidence behind it that suggests that it's really important? All these things we're going to talk about. But I wanted to start with this quote because out of everything I learned in that class, this stuck with me the most. Whenever I sit down, I really have to focus on a project. I try to think, how do I put myself in a place where I can actually focus and not some little thing knock me out of my deep thinking, and then suddenly that great thought that I was working on just kind of disappears. Okay, next slide. So let's think about what the research tells us. Let's look at some of the studies that have come out and some of the ideas around better time management. So I love this idea of mental models. When I think about this here, I think about the people that seem to have some magical ability to prioritize, always prioritize the right thing, always seem to, sort of like have this magical ability to juggle many things at one time. We all know these people in our lives. How do they do it, right? So one of the most compelling forms of research around time management is around building mental models. These people that seem to have this ability to do many things at once or focus on one task really deeply, what they're doing, whether they're aware of it or not, is they're often creating mental models around it. So they're visualizing what they have to do. They're visualizing future situations. They're even visualizing what may go wrong in that situation. Therefore, they're prepared for whatever might happen. One of the really interesting studies on these mental models, Charles Duhigg actually talks about, and it was very fascinating to me and kind of illustrates this point. There was a study done among nurses that take care of babies and toddlers. And they were trying to figure out what was the difference between the nurses that are really efficient in their job, seem to always catch when a child's sick, even when there's not any obvious glaring symptoms. They're just really amazing at their job, right? Versus nurses that seem to struggle, not catch all the symptoms, get overwhelmed easily, in the interest of being able to train nurses better. And one of the things that they found is the nurses that were able to balance a very stressful, hectic workload and were often able to catch illnesses and have a high rate of saving kids or helping these toddlers that were sick recover, they would have a picture in their mind of what a very healthy child should look like. And they were always comparing, okay, I see a little thing is off here. There's a little bit more blood under the bandage here, under the Band-Aid, that's a little bit odd, or the color of their skin's a little off, or should they be awake, should they be sleeping? It's just little thing. They have a very clear picture of what health looks like versus illness. And they would focus and compare what those images would look like in their mind. Now, when we think about our own days, right? How can we apply this to our lives? Athletes do it all the time, right? They visualize themselves hitting the hole in one, shooting the shot, landing the perfect shot, whatever the case may be. So if we can start to think about, visualize what a great afternoon will look like. What does it look like? I come home, I don't go to the Xbox. I go home, I rest for a little while, and I open the notebook and I start my math homework, right? We envision it, we think about it, we're intentional about it, and we create a model around what the healthy day looks like, that healthy routine looks like, and then we're able to kind of dive into it. Having those models in our mind help us with that. I'm going to pass it over to Sasha. She's going to talk a little bit about some more research.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. So I'm going to talk a little bit here about social media. So I'm a teenager. I'm sure a bunch of y'all are teenagers, and even for parents on the call as well. Social media can be something that we feel like we're forming connections, but often it can actually cause more stress than we think. So an MD on the pediatrics team did a big study, and they found that as your screen time increased, adolescents' stress and worry also increased, and it also caused a decrease in their coping abilities. So there's a direct correlation between the amount of time that you spend in front of a screen, maybe engaging with friends, maybe not, maybe just doom scrolling through Instagram, or watching a video down a rat hole in YouTube, and not feeling well. So we want to make sure that we highlight this here because the pandemic has had a pretty big effect on how we spend time on screens. Next slide, Rebecca. So obviously, y'all have lived through the pandemic, and it had a big impact on how we engage socially with people. So I know for me personally, I wasn't able to leave the house for what felt like several years, but things didn't really go back to normal for a couple of years. And we noticed that there's been a really big increase in screen time. So before the pandemic, people were spending a little bit under 4 hours. And after the pandemic, people were spending a little bit under 8 hours a day on screens. And some of that has to do with the fact that we're on Zoom calls more. We weren't able to meet up with people in person. And this was the only social interaction that we could have from a safe distance. But unfortunately, what we have to think about here is that our habits have changed because of the situation we're just coming out of. And as a result, we're going to need to take make some conscious efforts to reduce the amount of time that we're spending in front of a screen for our own mental well-being. We also know that mental health has been a big challenge throughout the pandemic, and it still is a challenge right now. So about 37% of teens have reported they have poor mental health, and 44% report that they are depressed. So this is something to really keep in mind here when we're talking about social media use, screen time, and your overall well-being, because it has a really big impact on how you feel. So overall, what does this mean? It means we have some unhealthy habits, and that's okay. I have them too. And it's something that we can combat by thinking closely about what habits do I have? What habits did I have before the pandemic, during and after, and where do I want to go? If you make your well-being a priority and you think about how you're going to form your day to make sure that you're taking care of yourself and also engaging with your friends and doing fun things. I'm not saying you shouldn't ever spend any time on social media because I absolutely do. But if you make your well-being a priority and you modify your daily routine just a little bit, you might feel just a bit better. So y'all are students. I'm a student too. This impacts studying pretty in a pretty big way. So taking this down to some very tangible tips. Take breaks. If that means that you're gonna do 40 minutes of math homework and you get a 5-minute break and you can doom scroll on Instagram for 5 minutes, watch a YouTube video for 5 minutes, absolutely, by all means do that. Make sure that you take breaks, take care of yourself, because it's pretty difficult to sit down and study for multiple hours on end. Maybe it works for you and that's the strategy you want to go for, but for the vast majority of people, that's not a great tactic for long-term sustainability. Another thing that I really recommend is prioritize your tasks. So when your teacher tells you what your assignment is, write it down. That way you don't have to hold it in a specific place in the back of your brain. And when you get home, maybe you actually do the wrong homework assignment because you couldn't remember the pages. So if you use a planner, you won't have to put a bunch of mental energy towards remembering what your tasks were. And it also is a great way to see, okay, when is this assignment due? What am I going to work on tonight? Instead of thinking, oh my gosh, I have 20 assignments, but maybe they're not all due tomorrow. So if you can break it down into, I have 2 assignments that I need to work on today, I have 2 assignments I need to work on tomorrow, and you continue that pattern, you'll knock out a lot more work and feel a lot less stressed. Another tip I have is study in a distraction-free zone. So I'm not saying that it's bad to work in groups because I absolutely love working in groups. But I am suggesting that when you need to work on an assignment by yourself, that maybe you don't do it in front of the television. Maybe you go find a place at the kitchen table and you decide to do your work there. Maybe you prefer to work out of the house and you like to work at a local library. Those are all great options, but just know yourself and where you're most productive. Most people are most productive when you don't have distractions. So it might mean turning the ringer off on your phone and really setting down to have a break from other people and other noises so that you can really be effective when you're studying. And lastly, set feasible milestones. Do not burn yourself out. You're in high school and you will have many more years of studying in college. And you do not want to be burned out by second year in high school because you have been doing these unrealistic studying throughout the day. And then the weekend, you're so burnt out that you can't work anymore. You need to set a sustainable pace because you're going to be doing a lot of work over the next few years. So make sure that use your planner, plan out your time, and make sure that you're realistic with yourself about how much time you can spend a day doing work.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Thank you so much, Sasha. That's fantastic advice. I wish someone had given me when I was in high school, because I was definitely not the best with time management. But let's think about
I'm going
forming
to pass it over to
17.
you.
Can you all hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
I think Sasha is breaking in and out.
Okay, no problem. We can go to the next slide, Rebecca. Thank you. So there's a whole bit of psychology that's really interested in forming habits. There's a ton of research on this specific aspect of psychology, and there's a lot of really valuable information we can learn here. So I just wanted to point out a couple of bullet points here that I think will be helpful for all of us to think about as we want to form those healthy study habits and routines and think about time management, think about how we could focus more, because so much of what we do is a habit. Actually, a lot of our life is kind of automatic. We wake up in the morning, there's a couple of things we immediately do. We brush our teeth, we know exactly where we need to drive to get to school. There are many things that we just kind of are on autopilot for, which is very important for our brain. We can't be making decisions constantly all day long. It takes a lot of energy to make decisions, right? So oftentimes there's several things in the course of a day that are just kind of on autopilot, which allows us to multitask as well. So this is all super important. The reason why it's so hard to break habits because there are places in our brain that's pretty rock solid to protect us in a sense, right? So we want to form new habits. We have to consider, okay, I have to become ritualistic almost about this new, healthier habit that I want to form or an old habit I want to break, right? So one of the things that can become a barrier to forming healthy habits is what psychologists call friction, right? So let's just say you set a New Year's resolution. You want to start going to the gym. You want to go to the gym 5 times a week, and you are very determined to do this. Well, friction in that decision in forming that habit might be how far the gym is from where you live. Is it 20 minutes away? That might become a problem after 2 or 3 weeks when your motivation, when your excitement about going to the gym starts to wane a little bit, right? Is there a closer gym, right? So we have to think about what is the friction to me having a successful routine. Now, think about, we'll go through this in a moment, but in the morning, you wake up, what are the barriers to you having a calm, nice, easy morning where everything's kind of set up and you could have a successful day? Some of the stuff you do at night might determine whether or not you're going to have friction in the morning to set those healthy routines, right? So you have to think about the whole day and how we could set ourselves up for success. Now, we also know from research that the way to change a habit is through repetition of behavior in a given context in the same way. Meaning, if you want to have the healthiest morning possible, preparing your clothes before, having breakfast in the morning, having 20 minutes to just kind of think about, look at your schedule, all that, you have to do it consistently. And you have to reward yourself, right? This is also really important. The brain responds to reward. So for me, I have my never-ending to-do list here, right? At the end of the week, when I've scratched everything off of my to-do list for work, I order myself some sushi. That's my reward for getting all my tasks done, right? Every Friday or Saturday, I get myself some takeout. And it makes me happy, and I reward myself for a productive week. Or if I work on some project and it's successful, So find little ways to reward yourself. The scratching off the to-do list for me in and of itself is very rewarding. Therefore, I break things down into very small pieces, but also having something that I love, small as it is, keeps me motivated as well. And then the idea of the environment that Sasha touched on earlier, it's so important, right? And I think I was reading a paper or watching a video earlier, and there was a lecturer talking about thinking about your environment and forming habits, almost like a chef preparing their station. So in high school, I worked in restaurants, and sometimes I would cover back of the house shifts, and we would have to come in and like 6 in the morning and prepare all the vegetables, cut everything up, all the sauces, everything. And if there was ever shorthanded back of the house for prep, the shift usually was a nightmare because we didn't have everything we needed set up, right? So if you think about your day or your week, as, okay, what are the things I need to have to succeed? What are the environments I need to be in? Where do I need to give myself time and space? All of these things are really important. Imagine you're the chef and you're preparing the kitchen. What is your life going to look like? How do you set everything up so you have everything you need?